Thinking of investing, working, or starting a business in the cannabis industry? We've got you covered right here on Plant Problems. Hosted by Tony Frischknecht, Plant Problems takes a different approach to cannabis than what you're seeing and hearing from the mainstream media. Come along with Tony and be in the know about how to invest, work, or start a cannabis business. Let's get the show started with your host, Tony Frischknecht.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Plant Problems. This is your host, Tony Frischknecht. I hope everybody is having a great day today. I want to welcome you back to another episode. Before I get started with our next guest, I'd like to talk a little bit about something back in 2012 here in Colorado. We saw some interesting things happen when legalization was passed in 2012. What had actually happened is the state allowed people in Colorado for the next year to purchase cannabis legally. But it was only until 2014 when out-of-staters could come and purchase. So us as business owners were extremely surprised at that time. We were like, this is actually happening. It shocked all of us that had been in the industry for several years prior. So we were a little bit unnerving. We were like, well, are people going to hate our state? Are they going to love our state? What's actually going to be happening over the next year as we build up to legalization, especially out-of-state visitors? So over the next 6 months, we heard a lot of discussions, and we started hearing more people talking about having their promotionals, their business plans were taking them into the state, which was funny. And we started hearing about people wanting to take their vacations here, and people starting to say, you know what, I want to check out Colorado. They're doing some pretty cool things there. So 2014 hit, and it was literally a tidal wave was happening. Once people saw the year prior, all of us Coloradoans standing in line and waiting for cannabis to be sold legally to them, I think that sparked some huge interest across the country. That's why I have my next guest on today. Her name is Susan Dupej, and she lives in Ontario, Canada, and she's doing some interesting stuff. She has a PhD in philosophy, Master's of Arts, Communication and Culture, Bachelor of Environmental Studies, Geography and Tourism. So, Susan, thank you so much for being on the show today. How are you doing?
Hi, Tony. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. I haven't had any researchers on yet, so this is a new area for me. So I'm here to learn as much as I can. But I do also want to give the listeners some different things to think about, because Canada, it's legal everywhere. But as wipes across each part of our states here in the U.S., people are experiencing different things. So what my first question I'd like to ask is, what is your research focus on, and how will it help our listeners?
Great question, Tony. My research is on cannabis tourism, specifically in Canada. My primary research objective is to understand how social responsibility can be used as a framework for forming best practices for tourism suppliers in Canada. So the plan was next summer as well. Things have changed a little bit because of COVID, but nonetheless, the research goes on. The plan is to interview providers of cannabis tourism products, and that can include a range of businesses. There are tour companies for sure. This is something that has come up in the States. In Colorado, there are tour companies. There are also accommodations, Airbnbs, that allow for consumption on premises, consumption on properties. You can also go camping, right? There are recreational activities that are popping up as well. The list goes on. And so what I want to know is, how are these suppliers of these tourism experiences, of these tourism products, how are they going to keep their visitors safe when they come to Canada? You know, they purchase from the business with the intention of consuming cannabis. This is what my research largely revolves around. And so the end goal is to come up with a report where I can put all of my findings together and deliver that to the industry so that there can be some form of consistency some form of accountability when it comes to running these types of businesses that largely revolve around the ability for people to consume cannabis.
Hey everyone, Tony Frischknecht here with Plant Problems. I want to thank you guys for listening in, your why do this show. And I also want to thank you for leaving me a review, taking your precious 15 seconds of your time and spending it with me and sharing me what I do well and what I can improve on. So please go to plantproblem.com and leave those questions, comments, or reviews. All right, back to the show. So who have you spoken with at this point? Because are we in the beginning of your journey, or are we kind of halfway through the journey right now of researching?
I have been doing informal research, research informally for the past 2 years. So since 2018, I sort of just jumped in and started to introduce myself to people who were in the industry already and tell them what I was doing. I wanted to research what they were doing. Although I have been interested in it for a long time and sort of following things for a long time, it wasn't until this year, 2020, that I was awarded a research grant to start official research on what I had just explained to you about the social responsibility and best practices. I am at the very beginning stages of the official research. Ethics is still in process, but once I have my ethics review accepted, then I plan on, going and talking with people involved in the industry. I've informally spoken with all kinds of people who are in marketing, people who run tours. I've gone on several tours. I've spoken with people. There's an attraction here in Ontario, actually, that is a resort, and it is cannabis friendly. And so I've spoken with him and about some of the things that he's had to think about in adopting this policy. I've also talked to the owner of Hotbox Cafe, which is a pretty popular tourist attraction. It's iconic in Kensington Market in Toronto. That brings in lounges into the conversation as well, something I hadn't mentioned. There's a town, Smiths Falls. And Smiths Falls is looking to be a leader in cannabis tourism, the cannabis capital of Canada, if you will. Cannabis tourism is officially part of their economic development strategy. So I've spoken with them, the town, the mayor. There's a visitors facility in Smiths Falls. I'm sure many of your listeners know that Tweed is a very large licensed producer, not only in Canada, but worldwide. And so they have a headquarters in Smiths Falls. And so Smiths Falls is sort of leveraging their presence to incorporate that into the economic development of the town. So there's all kinds of people who are getting into it that I've spoken with, like I said, informally so far.
So as you're talking to them informally, what is their reaction when you tell them the grant that you received and what your goal is and what you're working on? How do they react to that?
That's a really good question. They act in the same way that I tell anybody what I'm doing. And that is that people are usually taken aback, kind of surprised. And they say to me, "Oh, that's a thing?" And I'm like, well, I'm trying to make it a thing along with a bunch of other researchers and scholars, both in the Canadian and American context, and also in Europe as well, European, Asian scholars. So trying to make it a thing, but they are happy to hear it, I think, because from what I can gather, there is little advice, there is little guidance that is available to people who want to start businesses related to cannabis tourism. And the information is just not available. So I am wanting to bring the government on board here and to emphasize the importance of having these rules and regulations and policies in place because, people have to be kept safe when they come to Canada for these reasons.
I think that it's tough for people that aren't around cannabis all the time to understand where the regulators are coming from. And the government has certain duties to protect the society, right, of people. I didn't realize it, but there's a big difference in between safety, people walking around purchasing down in the city, and safety on the mountain, right? It affects people in different ways, and they have to worry about insurance issues, especially in the US, right? There's a lot of lawsuits and stuff like that. So I can imagine your research is going to take you down some different tunnels like that, to where it's like, oh, we didn't even think about this. It's all so new to us. We haven't grown through it, right? So providing that clarity, it sounds like you're going to be really saying, hey, here's A, B, C, and D. We've got a bunch of options for you to choose from. How can they do that, right? How can they take advantage of this? One other thing I want to point out is that you were stating they don't really know what to expect when you tell them what you're doing, right? So I speak with my listeners quite a bit about this, and that uneasiness when you tell them what you're doing, how do you know you're in the right place? And when you brought that up just a minute ago, it tells me you're onto something, because you figured out something where like, oh, I didn't even know that was a possibility. That happens time and time again in the cannabis industry. And you see people open up, it opens up a lot of new doors and a lot of new windows. So I'm speaking this to the listeners like, here's another option, right? You're not an expert in cannabis, correct?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I am a cannabis consumer. I have a medical prescription, but I would not place myself in the cannabis industry per se.
That's exactly what I thought. So, but somehow you figured out, because your love of research, the love of the plant, you've been able to figure out a new direction for your life. And there's a lot of people that are listening to my show that are like, how can I fit into the cannabis industry, right? And so you've got all this knowledge and all this background and research, and all of a sudden you've created this little niche for yourself, which it actually makes me extremely excited for you. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I can't wait to report back with my findings.
Absolutely. What's the next step for you now? You've got the grant. Where are you headed now?
Oh gosh. Well, this grant is one of many steps that I'm taking to reach my ultimate goal, the penultimate, which is to be a fully tenured professor at a university. I want to stay in Canada. I would love to stay in Southern Ontario and to do my research here, not only here, but to scale up, work with scholars in the United States, scholars in Europe that I mentioned as well. There are forms of cannabis tourism / drug tourism, as it is so labeled. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves in different places. I am also very involved with the industry. I'm taking part in an online conference actually at the end of July, which may or may not come out before this podcast does. But it's important to tell your listeners because it means that I am connected. I'm embedding myself in the industry. And so industry members can come to me when they have an issue or problems or they want to talk about things. I want to make myself available. I see myself as an information conduit between what's happening in academia and how we can take what's happening, the research, knowledge being constructed, and take that, implement it into the everyday realities of people who need solutions to problems that might not know where to look to find them. I might have them. Career in academia is first and foremost the goal, continuing with research. And teaching too. Teaching is a big part of the job. Like I said, I'm a conduit for information sharing. I very much enjoy teaching. I very much enjoy working with undergraduate students, passing on the knowledge, right? Finding those students who are interested like I am, right? And trying to train them and nurture them and sort of carry on the torch, more broadly speaking.
Well, you seem extremely passionate about it, is what I can.
I am for sure. And you asked me, Tony, how do I know it's for me? It can't not be for me. It can't not be. Like, it has chosen me.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a really different feeling though, right? It's hard to explain that to people when something picks you.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's taken time for me to realize that as well. Taking me time to realize, oh, wait a minute. I think I have a way of thinking and I have so many ideas that can help people who need help. So why wouldn't I share? Like, it is my responsibility. Like, how dare I keep my ideas to myself if they can help somebody? So I think that's something that I've sort of realized over the past 2 years, really, when I've really gotten into the research and really fully come out as a cannabis user, which is...
That's a different spot. We used to call it,
Mhm.
because I'm a grower, that's where I started.
Ah,
But we used to call it coming out of the
okay.
basement as well.
Yeah. For me, it would be coming out of the shed, coming out of the garden shed.
Exactly. So you brought up something before. I wanted to touch on the best practices.
Yeah.
Are you developing this, or do you already have this in mind on the layout of the research that you're going to develop these best practices?
I want to see what people are doing. It's kind of like I want to do a collection, kind of collect everything up and see. And then what I want to do is see if I can't organize them into different categories based on this idea of social responsibility, right? So first and foremost, I'm talking about consumption, right? How are we going to keep people safe with respect to, I don't want to say overdosing, that's rarely a thing, but it does happen, right? If something does happen, what policies, what guidelines do you have in place if something should happen to someone?
No. We were just talking about best practices. That was perfect, because you're trying to protect. A lot of this information is not only going to, from my understanding, it's not going to just the suppliers, but it's so that the government can control tourism when it comes in to keep people safe, correct?
Yes, exactly. And it's to cover their own butt, quite frankly, right? If you want to invite people into your home, you want to make sure they're safe and they have a good time and they leave your home telling everybody how much fun they had at your home and to go to that person's home, right? Which is, I think, what any destination would want.
Has the government had enough time to give some support to people that are visiting the country for cannabis tourism, or around, had the ability to do that at this point?
So, from what I have learned, the government is taking a very cautious approach, a very cautious stance to cannabis tourism. There was actually a quote in a National Geographic article in 2019 by a member of, I think it's called Destination Canada, which is the marketing board, the tourism marketing board for Canada. And they had made a comment was that they hadn't speculated on the impact that legalization would have on tourism. And I read it, and I think maybe that's where I completely lost it, because I couldn't believe that I was reading that. So that's when I decided, no. We can't do it that way. We have to speculate on what the impacts are going to be. Like, this is part of the whole program of being socially responsible in the first place.
Do you have any idea why they missed that?
I think that a lot of emphasis was placed on the growing and the selling, and how licenses were going to be distributed in that way. Cannabis tourism, although I believe it's a natural extension of the cannabis industry, it's not a consideration that was prioritized when things began. But now I think that because more and more businesses are popping up, and there's clearly evidence of a trend in cannabis tourism experiences and products that are available for people in Canada and around the world, I think that more and more the government, yes, I'm feeling as if they're inching towards being curious about what is this cannabis tourism. They're coming closer to asking questions about what it even looks like. And so I would be delighted to show them, to tell them, right? And so I think that's part of my role as a researcher, as an academic, is to bring government into the conversation and say, here, yes, look, this is what the industry is doing. And this is, where I think that maybe we can develop policies, guidelines, whatever, based on the information that I've collected through my research.
How do we keep the black market out of the legal channels? Or how do we work that into where we can make that legal? And we came at it from the bottom. You guys are coming from the top down. I'm curious to see what different collaborations that you have when you start connecting with people here in the US. because you're going to see two different sides. Just because the entire country is legal, it's like we have 50 little countries where it's starting to become legal right here, like it would be in Europe, right? It's really different. And so I think providing that clarity for your government is a huge step. It's amazing that they're that progressive and that forward thinking to fund grants. I haven't heard of anything like that.
I'm persistent, Tony.
Do you mind me asking how much your grant was for?
Okay, so the grant, I should mention the funder, it's the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, otherwise known as SSHRC. It's a Post-Doctoral Fellowship for 2 years, and the grant is worth $90,000.
Wow, that's awesome. There's that blows my mind. They're giving you nearly $100,000 to research this. That's great. That's great.
So yeah, I feel accountable for what I produce. And like, I really meant it when I said I can't wait to share with you what I find, because dissemination is a huge part of the research process. Talking to people, doing interviews, collecting data, that's all fine and dandy. But the crux, right, of it is giving it to the people who could really use the information. I can write an article. It can go on into an academic journal, that sits on the internet. Now, I was going to say on a shelf in a library, but that sort of dates me perhaps. But that's one area where the work will land. But I really want the work to land into the lap to the people who can really use it, and that will make it the industry better for everybody.
Well, and people that can really use it, what pops in my mind is you brought up that there was somebody setting up a resort type style. As a business owner, that my eyes light up, because I'm like, oh man, if I had this research, I could make a lot better decisions on placement, what type of products. I mean, these are all things that you can build a business on that right now, the guys that are in the industry in Canada and the US, I assume there's some people doing their own research, but no vast amount across the country. So what you're providing, I don't even think they understand at this point how valuable that information can become, because it is getting so competitive in the US now that any edge you have to be successful, you'll take it. Coming from my entrepreneurial side, it's like, okay, I got an edge. Nobody sees this. I see this tunnel and I'm going to go down it. And then all of a sudden you find a niche like what you're doing right here. So, Susan, I wanted to ask you, so what's the name of the conference you're going to be doing here at the end of the month, end of July?
The name of the conference is Virtual Canatourism. And we have a number. I'm working with a marketing business. Her name is Jen Mason. She's the one who is sort of taking it on. And we have speakers from the industry. We have a lawyer. We have someone who runs retail. I'll be doing speaking as well. And then the shtick, I suppose, the draw for the conference is that there's going to be networking involved. We're going to have breakout sessions so that people can connect and come together, which is something that has been incredibly difficult over the past, 2020, since 2020 began, right? COVID and all of the challenges it's presented. But that will definitely be information that I can put up on all of my social media sites as well. We'll get the official link. They're still finalizing it, but once I have that, I'll get it to you.
Yeah, send it to me and then I can attach it to this episode. Well, Susan, I enjoyed having you on today. It's been a pleasure. I wanted to extend an invite for when you do finish your research, or even along the way, we can touch base. If you come across some interesting stuff, I'd love to have some more discussions on it, because you're in an interesting area that's just going to explode. So if they want to reach out to you, any of the listeners, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
The best way to contact me is probably through email. My email is sdupej, DUPEJ, at uoguelph.ca. But I also have Instagram account, Facebook account. People can find me that way too.
Awesome. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this interview. There's going to be some fun stuff. I really hope that we start seeing some of this come out of the US too, because I could think of the collaboration that you could have with some different people would be amazing, right? So
that sounds great.
Yeah, exactly. Guys, please check out plantproblem.com for this episode. You can leave any questions or comments in the review area. Also, always feel free to reach out to me at any point. I would love to ask Susan some more questions. And guys, I am wide open. So give me some questions to give this lady, and I'd love to find out for you. I appreciate everybody listening out there. You guys are incredible. I'm starting to see some really fun stuff you guys are doing out there. So thanks so much, and keep bringing it, okay? Thanks, Susan. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony.
You've just listened to another insightful episode of Plant Problems. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues. For additional resources or to leave a review, head over to plantproblems.com. Join us again next week on Plant Problems with Tony Frischknecht. We look forward to having conversations with you as we go along this journey.